Hello everyone, Shadow here with Shadow Radio Show number 2, December 28th, Sunday 2014. Before we begin, I just want to put out a couple announcements. Most of the links and information that you need are located in the About This Community section, so I ask that you read that and check out my Google Drive with the rules. I get asked the same questions every day. How do I access Shadow Library? Well, it's the second link in the About This Community, and the username is #freedom, all capital letters, and the password is knowledge, all capital letters. So that's what I want to make sure that you guys read. It's real important that you keep up on the rules and the knowledge base. So we got a bunch of good questions here. We'll pick the questions that we're going to go ahead and jump right in. The first question that we have here today on Shadow Radio is by mě He asks what a beginner in InfoSec world should do to get more into it, GRC part of the technical side. The technical side is the most important, in my opinion, because you learn by hands-on. I mean, if you're looking at the GRC side of it, that's not really my game. I don't like logistics and things like that. You pretty much learn by hands-on, and you're only going to be able to do that and learn some of the latest techniques if you're actually setting up a lab and doing it yourself. So, I mean, you want to write paperwork and stuff like that, you can do with GRC, but that's really not my side. I would say to do the technical side better. That's just my opinion. Of course, opinions of everyone else could be different, but that's just me. The next question we have is by Leon Kilat. I hope I pronounced that right. Kilat. He's thinking of taking an online course. What do I think of offensive security? Is OSCP certification a big plus for cybersecurity companies? Well, it's all going to depend on the job that you're doing in the cybersecurity factor or portion of the company. Because if you're just doing web security, or if you're doing hardware security, if you're doing router security, firewall, they all differ. So you're going to have to find something based on wherever you want to work. It's difficult to say, because if you're working with a company that uses all Cisco equipment, a Cisco certification would be good. However, if you're working with a web hosting company, you're probably going to want to look at some kind of certification for web servers or whatnot. So it really depends on where you're going to work. We got a bunch of questions from Lloyd Holt here. I'm going to go through them. So the next probably 5, 6, or 7 of them is by Lloyd, which yeah, I appreciate your contributions, Lloyd. You ask a lot of good questions. He says, first, is it safe to use Pirate Bay or an equivalent? Well, I mean, that all depends on who's watching. I mean, if law enforcement decides to enforce people downloading things from the Pirate Bay in the United States, then they do have grounds to do that. So it's pretty much use at your own risk. Have I ever used Pirate Bay? Of course, there's a lot of people that have. So it's just going to be a personal choice for you. The next question Lloyd asks is, can I address file sharing on a Google Drive? He wants to share certain files but not others. Well, you don't have to share files. What I do is I create a public drive or a public folder within Google Drive. Okay, and with that I just share that public folder to everyone. And then anything that I want others to get, I simply put inside that folder, and it acts as a hierarchical tree. So if you have sharing permissions on the public folder, everything subsequently below that is going to be shared. Anything outside that is not shared. I mean, you can look at the properties of a document to see if it's shared with the tools on the Google Drive. So yes, you want the files only that you share to be available, of course. So if you don't select share in Google Drive, it's not going to share them. The next question Lloyd asks, is it true that most ATMs are still running Windows XP? Yeah, according to Computer World, yeah, most ATMs, probably 6 out of 10, I guess, are still running Windows XP after Microsoft obsoleted it. So I'm taking this information directly from the ATMIA, that's the ATM Industry Association. About 38% of the nearly 4.5 million ATMs in use are powered by Windows XP. But they haven't migrated off the OS, so it's a very bad thing. Also, according to Computer World, the Payment Card Industry Standards Council, the PCI SSC, which is responsible for overseeing security standards and payment interfaces, already noted that ATMs still on Windows XP after April 8th will need to have certain compensating controls in place to be considered PCI compliant. So, you know, the PCI SSC estimates that Windows XP powers about 95% of ATMs in the world. I'm taking this directly from Computer World. The vast majority of ATM operators are aware of the deadline. They were aware. So they've already moved or beginning to move or in the process of moving their systems to Windows 7. The reason for that is mostly the software that was designed for these systems was built to specifically run on XP. So if you were to upgrade, it would nullify the software or make the software not run. Yeah, that's a pretty bad thing. Why are they still running? I mean, I think that I just told you. After April 8th, I think Microsoft said after April 8th, that's the day that they'll stop providing security updates. So most ATM hacks have been at the hardware level, though, to use the devices like skimmers. You know, other security risks include attacks on ATM networks, local ports, or browsers. So without Microsoft's technical support on security fixes, ATM operators also risk falling out of compliance with the requirement 6.2 of the PCI DSS. So, you know, there's your answer. They're trying to get to it, but there's still a lot that are going to be exposed. You know, the next question is, the Internet of Things will be growing unbelievably in the future, and these things need to be protected. My thoughts on these? Well, of course, I wouldn't be running an information security community if I didn't think things needed to be protected. But it's hard to get to people who fear change. You know, have you ever tried to get an avid Windows user to switch over to a new operating system, such as Linux or even Mac for that matter? People just hate to change things. However, when you deploy a bunch of things with a singular operating system and proprietary software, it becomes a dollar factor. It becomes a financing factor or a budget factor. So yeah, we have to protect these things, but you know, when you have somebody who knows absolutely nothing about technology and information security running a company, they're just going to look at it as draining some of their budget money, you know, or some of their money that they make from their production or products or services or whatnot. They're just reluctant to spend money on security. They think that, you know, hey, well, it's not going to happen to us. I mean, that's the generalized consensus when you're speaking to a CEO, and believe me, I've spoken to CEOs and boards of directors who would rather not spend money and spend it on advertising than security. It's a sad fact, you know, of information security, you know. In my first show, I mentioned the motivation to protect all ourselves. Is end-to-end encryption and two-factor authentication enough? Well, Lloyd, I don't know if really anything's going to be enough. You know, you have a company such as the NSA, and you have, you know, I say company, but you have a division or a group of people like the NSA who have pretty much almost unlimited resources to break our encryption, to break personal encryption, to break these things, you know. So how long is it really going to last? With the advent of computers and the speed, you know, increasing all the time, you know, we're moving into the age where we're going to have quantum computing, which will pretty much nullify most of our encryption standards today. You know, we could pretty much break one of our ciphers or whatnot in a matter of minutes with quantum computing. So yeah, it's a big thing. But if you want to keep safe and if you want to do things, there's only so much you can do. Multi-level encryption, which I put a video out, will help you with that. You can encrypt things in many different ways, and multiple layers of encryption, of course, I think would be the best solution. So you're looking at something that's been asked and re-asked and interpolated and looked over. The bottom line is, if you want to keep something safe, encrypt it with multiple layers. That's the best advice that I can give you. What version of Linux are you running? Is it BSD? Well, I run a lot of different versions, BSD being one of them. I run Ubuntu Server. I don't run Red Hat releases. You know, I don't use RPM, so I use Debian, you know, Arch Linux here and there. Just all different distributions. It depends, you know, what I'm really in the mood for. Primarily for graphics display and things like that on laptops, Ubuntu works pretty well with that, so I use that, you for laptops. But any major servers or anything, it's going to be BSD or some enterprise system, things like that. Kristen Madison asks, personal VPNs to cover your browser history. What are your thoughts? Well, VPN doesn't necessarily cover your browsing history. Your browsing history is compartmentalized within your browser itself. So if you want to cover your browser history, then you simply set the browser not to save cookies and history, and clean out your history every time you close the browser, or have it not save it. What a VPN does is basically masquerade your IP address, hide your IP address, so one can't find what location or ISP you're currently, accessing data on the internet. That's what a VPN does. VPN also encrypts the communications between you and the server, or you and the VPN system, acting as a proxy. A proxy is basically a middleman that forwards your packets and information and requests pages on the internet for you, so they don't show that they're coming from your home IP, or the IP which you want to keep from prying eyes. Okay. Now, according to some information that we recently received, VPNs aren't as safe as we once thought they were. So use caution, and use very much caution when you use free VPNs, because a lot of government spying agencies will take over VPNs and set up free VPN relays, and then monitor the traffic. So you have to be wary about that, so be careful. Sam Smith asks, does securing my info flag me? He says he would like to take more control of his online presence as a regular web user, and do tactics such as anonymous browsing and VPNs flag me as a person of interest, when really I have nothing to hide. Well, let me say this first, Sam. It doesn't matter if you have anything to hide. It's your right. It's your right to privacy. And this is where a lot of people falter when they think about this. You have a right to your privacy. We're constitutionally guaranteed to have that right. And that's been taken away from us, and I don't agree with that point. So remember that it's your right, It doesn't matter if you have anything to hide. Does securing your info flag you? Well, in a way it does. But there's certain things. If you start using encryption and you start sending things through encrypted channels, you're going to draw attention to yourself. Yes, because, we have a government that generally is suspicious of such activity. Okay, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You have that right, so do it anyway. Even if it does flag, it doesn't matter. Yes, so certain activities online, whether you're innocent or not, will flag you as, a potential someone to look at, or person of interest. It's sad but true, but that's the state in which we live. Is it safe to run Windows for gaming only and dual boot with Linux for everyday computing, or does dual booting make a system more vulnerable? Vulnerability is insignificant when it has to do with dual booting. You're simply putting two operating systems on the same or different hard disks and using a boot manager to load one or the other at boot time. This doesn't affect your system being vulnerable. What does affect your system is the things on that operating system that run. So if you boot up Linux and you have a flaw, or you're using some package that's vulnerable, then that's going to be your vulnerability, not dual booting the system. So dual booting the system won't cause you any problems. Only the operating system itself, with the software that it runs, will cause you vulnerabilities and viruses and whatnot. Now, there are some boot sector viruses, but that doesn't really apply to your question. Sam Smith's next question is, what's the best Linux encryption software, and is it possible to encrypt a dual boot system? Well, that's a difficult question. What's the best Linux encryption software? Because everybody has their own favorites. I like TrueCrypt. I've used TrueCrypt for a long time. It's an interesting, because we've had that topic go on inside the community there, with TrueCrypt going by the wayside. Now, I'm pretty sure that the reason why that went by the wayside is because agencies and those who are unnamed, government agencies and whatnot, had a hard time breaking that disk encryption. So I do use that. A lot of operating systems under Linux have that option to encrypt the partitions, okay, with volume management and whatnot. So you probably want to get a distribution like Debian or Ubuntu or something that encrypts the disks during the install. Okay? Is it possible to encrypt a dual boot system? Well, it's difficult to say that too, because once you install a Linux version, for instance, let's say you're installing Ubuntu, when you ask to encrypt the disk, it asks you at boot to decrypt the disk. So is it possible? Well then, yeah, you have to find something that's going to be able to be encrypted with Windows. If you're using Windows, there has to be a boot sequence in order to encrypt or decrypt that disk. So I haven't used Windows in a long time, so I can't really tell you what's the best thing for Windows to use for disk encryption. All I know is that when I use Linux, I have a great encrypted manager that I use with Linux base. So that's just what I'm going to say. Why did I have my computers taken from me? I really wouldn't prefer to discuss that. I had a really nice setup here about 8 months ago. I can tell you the story if you're interested in it, but it's not really one of my favorite topics to discuss because I'm still waiting to get my machinery back from the FBI. What had happened was I worked for a company not too long ago who made an accusation that I had changed some passwords on some Linux systems that belonged to a company. Okay? And then attempted to extort them for money by holding the systems hostage, which didn't happen. The reason why this came about was because the particular owner of the company had some ties with the local government. For instance, his father was a state trooper, his cousin is a magistrate, so to call and make that kind of accusation, it's really irrelevant whether I'm innocent or not. They came right into my home without a search warrant, and they pretty much took $12,000 worth of equipment and took it up to the FBI, and it's still sitting there. So that's what happened. Question number 5 is, do I also play Battlefield on PC? No, I don't game on PC. I only game on console. Next question, final question for Sam there, is do I know of any interesting InfoSec IRC channels? Well, there's millions of them. If you simply load up an IRC client, such as XChat or whatnot, and go search for some channels dealing with InfoSec and hacking, I'm sure you're going to find them. There's plenty out there. kęⱧဍæ or however you want to pronounce his name, asking me what in the world is talent keyhole? TK, basically. TK covers a space-based imaginary intelligence, SIGINT and MASINT, signals intelligence and measurement and signature intelligence collection platforms. They're basically related to processing and the analysis techniques, a research, design, and operation of those platforms. The original talent compartment was created around the 1950s for the U2 program. So in the 60s, around, I think 1960 was broadened to cover all national aerial reconnaissance, and the keyhole compartment was created for satellite intelligence. So Talent Keyhole is now a top-level control system. Keyhole is no longer a distinct department. Known compartments include RUF, which is IMINT satellites, and ZARF, which is ELINT satellites, and ches-U2. So that's pretty much, what Talent Keyhole is, if that's what you were asking. kęⱧ asks, what distro do I mainly use? I believe that I already answered that. I use multiple distributions. I use BSD, I use Ubuntu, I use Arch, Debian, maybe Mint here and there. No Red Hat distributions though. So we're almost done. We got one more question here by kęⱧ. Actually, we have two. It says, what's my main interest in InfoSec? Well, I have a pretty eclectic interest in computers. So when I do InfoSec, pen testing is really interesting. Part of what I do. Pen testing, data recovery, and programming. So those are the three primary things. Infiltration via code, things like that, assembly programming, getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's going on behind the code, how the system handles the TCP stack, all that good stuff, network analysis, packet dissection, all that good stuff is interesting for me. And let me jump back real quick here to käⱧhas he asked if I got any good scalpel tools recovering deleted files and what program. Well, if you're looking for a public or free or open source program, you can use käⱧrec or TestDisk for Linux. Those two are the most available programs out there that seem to be pretty decent with recovering data. When it comes to me, I have my own personal programs that I've written to extract data from hard disks and whatnot. It works fairly well. I don't release that kind of stuff because I simply don't want what I write to fall into the wrong hands. So if you're looking for something public, käⱧrec and TestDisk will work just fine. You can try it out, delete some things on a disk, and then try to use the recovery system. So Ryan O'Donnell asks, I heard of käⱧ and käⱧ. Is there any useful tools out there that are just strictly Linux-based? Well, Ryan, käⱧ and käⱧ are Linux-based. They're distributions of Linux, specially made distributions of Linux with pre-installed packages that do certain things. So mostly the security tools. So basically, if you want to build your own, you can build your own, installer image. It'll work just fine. So asking that question, it's strictly Linux-based. Well, they all are. So do a little bit of reading and try to fulfill what you're asking. Install a standard distribution and then get a list of software packages that are available on those two systems, and install them and play with them one at a time so you can understand how to use them. Okay? So this is Shadow. I answered quite a few questions tonight. We're about 21 minutes for the show, so we're going to go ahead and move on. I want to say one thing here. We have Dima who posted some interesting documentation here that reveal which encryption tools the NSA couldn't track. And ironically, on that list was TrueCrypt. Now, if you put two and two together, when my systems were taken from me and sent to the FBI 8-9 months ago, a lot of my disk was encrypted and a lot of stuff was encrypted using TrueCrypt. And no more than 6 months later, TrueCrypt was just out of the woods. So all of a sudden now there's an exploit in it, with Keybase, and nobody's supposed to be using it. Well, it just seems too convenient that around that time these things were happening, and now people were downing TrueCrypt saying it's insecure. Well, I'm still using TrueCrypt, and until I find some actual documentation or I actually find a flaw myself, I'm going to continue to use it, and I would say that you guys do the same. The TrueCrypt website, where you could get it before, told people that what you need to do is migrate all of your data over to Windows, whether BitLocker or something on Windows. I don't even use it, don't even research it, but they said you move all your information over to Windows and encrypt it that way. Yeah, I don't think I'll be doing that, guys, so I'm glad you all put together a bunch of those questions. And let me say one more thing here before we take off about the GPG encryption. If you don't know how to do this, please read the manual page for GPG or GNU-PG. It's very easy to use. There's a lot of people asking me, well, how do I generate my own key, or how do I do this, or how do I do that with GNU-PG? It's so very simple to use. Don't let it dissuade you from using some encryption. My public key's available right there in the About Community section. And please, guys, follow me on Twitter too, so I can get these things out and posted. I got a Twitter, I got a Facebook. I'm not trying to look for a million followers or anything like that. I just want to be able to get to the point where everybody's using encryption. Everybody's using or being safe with their files or whatnot. So keep your systems updated. Keep your antivirus updated. Those Linux users, you already know what you want to do and whatnot. So this is Shadow Radio. Show 2 signing out. I'm glad you're all listening. Stay tuned for show 3 coming soon. See you around, guys.